You guys see the meme that's like, I trade you being able to say retard again. You receive global economic recession. Fair trade.
Fair trade. Congrats, everybody. You can now say retard again, but in exchange, we get a global economic recession. Welcome back to another episode of Human Reaction, your weekly source for independent commentary on cultural news and politics, where it's always our mission to arm you with the tools you need and the mental models, David, to cut through media misdirection and resist the mono-narrative. I'm joined by my esteemed co-hosts and our esteemed producer, David Rand, Kyle Mack, and Bennett, back from his travels, wherever the hell he was.
It's really been
We still don't have
a
Stream
couple.
Deck, so
So I guess
surprise, motherfucker.
our fifth character, the Stream Deck, is not operating.
But we're back in the room together.
It
It's
has-
so
it has
nice.
been like 2 months
We
since
didn't
all
even
of us
do a
been
group
together.
hug. I feel like we should have.
Should we do it hands in?
Oh, yeah.
All right, go
let's
team.
Come on.
Go
come on,
team.
Come on.
This is where the
Come
Stream
on.
Deck needs to be like,
Been a second up. Let's go.
All right.
Our hands touched.
David, what are we talking about today?
Liberation Day, fellas. You guys feeling liberated?
Sexually, yes.
hell yeah, brother.
I like to
Economically,
think
not so much.
It's like liberation in the Buddhist sense, you know?
Liberated from your earthly possessions?
Yeah, right?
From your portfolio?
Yeah. You just don't have to worry about it anymore, right? You got to give up your attachments. Attachments
me,
are where
I'm
suffering
poor.
comes from.
You're right. We're all becoming more enlightened as a result of this policy, and we should really metaphysically thank Trump for this.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
He's leading us on a Buddhist path. One of the ninefold.
That's a
guys.
beautiful thing. Never would have seen that coming. Certainly not on my bingo card.
It's why one of the things I want to point out to you guys is probably one of the most heavily hit by the trade deal is we have a story from Unusual Whales saying just in, the Trump administration has put a 10% tariff on the Heard Island and McDonald, which has a population of 0 people and is inhabited only by penguins. Now, this hit me hard. This hit me very hard.
Going after your people, Kyle.
All the penguins, they have decided to rise up on McDonald Island. It is strangely fitting that it's McDonald Island because, like,
Trump works there.
well, Trump works there, but it is a thing because for those that don't know, we're referencing pudgy penguins, which is a thing that I'm a big investor in. But in this space, every time markets go down, everybody like McDonald's will tweet at us and say, "We got jobs ready for you." So it is just it's kind of fitting that it's McDonald Island.
That is sick.
Where the penguins reside.
That is amazing.
We also have from Declaration of Memes. It's are you winning, son? I think we're in a trade war with the United States. It's 2 penguins.
This episode is brought to you by Revved Up Promo, the official apparel partner of Human Reaction. Revved Up is a premier full-service shop specializing in laser engraving, screen printing, and embroidery. Not only are they now making all of our apparel right down the road from us, they can do the same for your brand and ship it to you anywhere in the world. Revved Up helps you navigate the extensive universe of merch options and uses state-of-the-art techniques to showcase your brand in its very best light. So if you want to support our show and our generous sponsor, you can now do so by buying our merch and by turning to Revved Up Promo for your own custom apparel needs. Reach them at revveduppromo.com. That's with 2 V's and 2 P's, or just check the show notes for a link. A lot of people might be questioning the motives and the rationale and some of the calculus around these tariffs. This one in particular, I think, raises that perfectly. Like, who was making these decisions? Did they just like, what was the rationale here?
Well, I think it is technically, it's owned by Australia, the island, but I don't know why it was fit into the calculus.
Well, that is the core of the theory that the process in which they generated the chart came from a very low level, kind of like
analysis.
Throw it together sort of thing, right?
Yeah.
So the theory is that they went to Wikipedia and they're like, what are all the countries in the world? Copy paste, threw it in ChatGPT, run this calculation based upon their tariff rates,
or their the balance of trade, right? They just like subtracted the balance of trade and used that percentage difference as the tariff rate.
It's actually a division. So, I got a link in there, Kyle, if you want to look at it for the tweet where they kind of. This is the tweet that blew up the biggest, trying to reverse engineer where these rates came from. Mm-hmm. And so effectively what it does, it takes the trade deficit divided by imports from that country. And then sometimes they divide it in half for reasons.
To be nice?
Yeah, right. Because sometimes it's like, well, when you're very poor, right, it would be like 70%.
Yeah,
right. So
yeah,
then they're like, we'll cut it back down to 35. You know,
We're gonna give you one.
when it was like 5%. So you're
Yeah.
still seeing this massive increase. So this guy James, I don't know, whatever, say last name.
Surowiecki. James Surowiecki. We're gonna go with that.
Okay. He's this is one of the tweets that blew up the biggest on it, and I think this is right. So if you take this, Wikipedia list that does include these islands, most of the lists don't include these islands, but Wikipedia does for some reason, and then you put it into ChatGPT's with the question of what is the easiest way to get to a balanced trade based upon existing tariffs. This is what it punches out that calculation of dividing most of the time.
Oh God, this is just so delicious.
Yeah. But some of the countries have an export surplus. And so they got the 10% treatment. So remember when Trump was running, he basically said, I'm going to increase tariffs all by 10%. Like that was mostly his claim. He didn't claim this, the thing that he did today, right? In fact, a lot of the market news coverage
We've
is
got a
like,
concept of a plan.
yeah, right.
The reciprocal tariff thing has been something that has been part of the claims.
Yes.
That's not new.
Well, that's been more emphasized lately. I think most of the election promises were more oriented to bring back jobs, manufacturing, and the rhetoric around a 10% universal rate or something like that to do so. So when you look at like Morocco, Australia, Afghanistan, they just got a straight 10% rate.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fair enough.
I feel like we're skipping into the numbers too quick. I feel like we have
We're
to give a
jumping
lot of
He
the
brought
context.
it up. I don't know what to
I
tell
feel
you.
like we have to bring in some of the context. We should actually pull from the speech itself and then kind of talk about what's going on, and then we can kind of dive into the nitty gritty on the numbers here.
That's
just
a
to
great
kind of
idea.
get people up to speed if you haven't been paying attention to the whole saga.
I was just laughing at
Right.
penguin memes. David went into the numbers.
Yeah.
Well, no, you asked the question. You said where these numbers come
What's the
from. How did
rationale?
that
I
happen?
agree, Joe. It was David's fault. I agree.
What is this?
Bennett, do you agree?
I am Switzerland.
All right. Well, we still got a majority.
Yeah, because I think we have to give the full context here before we get into the actual numbers here.
Yeah,
of
I
going
agree.
into all of the internet sleuthing of how did they come to numbers. We have to actually get to the numbers before that.
Fact.
Right. So here is just directly pulled from the speech. The speech, it was like an hour, so this is only like a minute of it. But it is where the glorious chart was revealed. But here is kind of the lead up to the chart reveal.
For decades, our country has been looted, pillaged, raped, and plundered by nations near and far, both friend and foe alike.
Bleep that.
American steel workers, auto workers, farmers, and skilled craftsmen. We have a lot of them here with us today. They really suffered gravely. They watched in anguish as foreign leaders have stolen our jobs, foreign cheaters have ransacked our factories, and foreign scavengers have torn apart our once beautiful American dream. We had an American dream that you don't hear so much about. You did 4 years ago, and you are now, but you don't too often, and for many years and decades even, you didn't hear too much about. Our country and its taxpayers have been ripped off for more than 50 years, but it is not going to happen anymore. It's not going to happen. In a few moments, I will sign a historic executive order instituting reciprocal tariffs on countries throughout the world. Reciprocal, that means they do it to us and we do it to them. Very simple. Can't get any simpler than that.
Very simple. Can't get any simpler.
They made it as simple as they possibly could, apparently.
Yeah, he was
Allegedly.
ad-libbing on the spot there, I think, because farmers are mostly exporters. They definitely benefit from low tariffs. To be clear, that's not how that works. Remember when we had to bail out the farmers last time? 'Cause
Yeah.
we imposed tariffs? Yeah.
Yeah.
But weird that was in the list. But
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so, okay. Are we ready to get into the numbers, Kyle?
yeah.
Do we have your approval?
Sure. I'm just like we did have a bunch of stuff queued up before the numbers, but okay.
I'm just trying to go with the flow of the conversation here. Jeez,
It's like
man.
if you guys want to go into it,
just
sure.
flow. Let go, Kyle. You got to be more liberated.
I think you guys are a little too liberated.
I'm ready to take my shirt off.
Dude, I'm not even drinking alcohol.
I wanted to get into some of the political dynamics before we got there, where it's just like, how is he doing this? Because there's a lot of calls of like this being unconstitutional, things like that. Like we can get into some like, did they use ChatGPT? But like that to me is not the political dialogue that's going on right now.
Don't talk about it, Kyle. Be about it. Tell us about the political implications.
Well, so like because a lot of people are asking, because like you even have people like Ron Paul saying that, or Rand Paul saying, Ron Paul probably is too. But Rand Paul is saying that this is unconstitutional. You know, the Democrat opponents are talking about how like this is something that has to go through Congress. There's a bunch of challenges that's coming up. But so I think that there's a conversation to be had where this is all being put under place of emergency powers. So Trump, in like his first day, I think it was one of the first executive orders that he signed in that we have an emergency. We have a national emergency that is the border and trade deficits that was looped into the national emergency,
and energy, right?
And energy.
Yeah.
There are other things in there too, but essentially what this is allowing him to do, this is the legal, what's allowing him to do here is that he's able to use the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, AIPA.
That's awfully Mexican sounding. Pretty suspicious. Just saying. Sounds like it was made by a Mexican.
And so what they are doing with that is
I love having you guys back in the studio. It's so good. It's so much better.
When there weren't so many Mexicans.
Oh, man. We are liberated from the notes, Kyle. We're going. Let's go. It's cool, man.
I just worry this is bad listening.
No, it's going to be fun. We're having a good time.
That's what I'm worried about.
Embrace the improv.
Okay.
Continue.
What this gives the president the power to do is to implement tariffs, to freeze people's assets. Other ways that this was used in the past was things like George Bush used it for freezing terrorist assets or things like linked to terrorist activity.
Carter used it. Yeah, in response to the Iranian crisis.
Yeah, it's been used about like 60 times since the 70s. It was implemented in the 70s. So this is kind of the legal justification for them going through, because Congress has the power of the purse, you know, all this stuff. Like, you would suspect that a lot of these things would have to be implemented through congressional approval. But now we're in this, everything's an emergency state of being in America.
Congress has just been liberated from their powers.
Okay. So this is the classic. Well, if you give this power away from Congress to the president, someday it's going to bite you in the ass. You know, libertarians have been saying this forever. Said it with the war powers. Probably said it this at the time. Classic argument that, you know, the Constitution should mean something and we should like follow its structure and not allow Congress to give away its powers to the president. Otherwise, someday it could be abused. And every time the establishment goes, oh, what are you talking about? We're never going to abuse that.
We would never.
And then this happens, to like, oh my God, it's being abused. You're just like, what?
What's the safe word again? What's the safe word? I forget.
What is kind of funny, like, it is one of these things where it's just like, are trade deficits a national emergency? Like that is kind of the question that the opponents are using, and you're kind of like, yeah, like I kind of get I get the border crisis, I get like that stuff as the national emergency, but trade deficits, national emergency? It's an interesting.
I mean,
it's a very interesting, loose way of interpreting these things, right?
It's liberated. Kyle.
Well, he visualizes, and I'll try to steelman his position here just for the fun of it. He visualizes trade deficits as literally running a deficit. Like, the country is a business and the country spends more than it makes. That's how he visualizes. So whenever you're thinking, it's not a good model for international trade. But if you're trying to put your mind into their set, and I've been preparing for this for like 3 months. I've been listening to all of the people from the Trump administration, around the Trump administration, like the intellectual backers. Tucker Carlson had a guy on, I forget his name right now.
Yeah.
That had it was a strong defense of his point of view. But I think it really boils down to that there is a net output without the inherent good a net input without an inherent good of a net output.
Sure.
The problem with that is that's not how international trade works, in the sense of we are still making things here. We just make it with less people because we've automated manufacturing.
Well,
right?
we also
and
export services which don't kind of appear the same, right?
Yeah. Well, it isn't. Well, Is that calculated in the trade numbers? Not the same. No, that's for sure. Right. And obviously if tariffs don't apply.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you tariff financial services?
Yeah. Right. Or tariff, home coaching, things like that,
We've got a lot of life
advice.
coaches in America.
Yeah.
Making good money.
So it's just, there's a whole bunch of things to that I think sit in the background to the issue and are non-trivial. And whether or not it's an emergency, that's an interesting one too, because we've run in deficit for a long time.
Right.
So why we declare an emergency now?
Right.
What's the basis of that? So another part of that. So when he first put in tariffs on Mexico and Canada, there was a judicial process to say, well, use this as an emergency to adjudicate that original executive order on the emergency. That never made it to a high enough court to really matter. But initial courts were saying it's not an emergency. What are we doing here? So will these last long enough to actually make it to the Supreme Court, and what will the Supreme Court decide?
Right.
Is the question.
So I guess, my question here is strategically, does it matter for that reason, right? Do these numbers actually matter because will they actually be put into effect, or is there an ulterior motive here that Trump is working towards?
And one of the reasons why the other lawsuit didn't go much further is because Canada and Mexico capitulated.
Right.
So
it's an art of the deal component where he's saying, I'm going to just totally screw up your economy by imposing these tariffs if you don't do what I want on this issue.
And additionally, he had the extra, a much stronger case because that was specifically about fentanyl too. So he's justifying these under the same thing they said about fentanyl. But do we get fentanyl from Norway? 30% tariff on Norway.
I don't know. Those penguins sending their fentanyl over.
We do get from Norway is Ozempic.
I'm pretty sure that's Denmark.
Close enough.
They're all the same
to Joe.
It's just the Nordic countries.
Well,
It's like, I've been there. I know. They're different countries.
Bennett actually went and toured the Novo Nordisk factory. Actually, he was there.
That's what I was doing last summer.
I thought you did look skinnier.
You look great, Bennett. You're looking really good.
Thanks.
Well, and this is one of the reasons why I wanted to lay the emergency power stuff going and all the legal side of things before we got into the numbers, because I think there is potentially an argument to be made that, because here, we'll pull up the glorious chart.
The chart
of glory.
Trump loves his charts. Charts saved his life,
I mean, it really did.
It really did.
That was immigration, though.
Where we are, yeah.
So the Mexicans saved Trump's life.
Yeepa.
Because some of these numbers look kind of absurd at off rip. We have China with the thing that they're doing with the calculations here is that they are putting not just tariffs, they're also putting non-tariff trade barriers and is the country manipulating their currency to screw us on trade? These are the types of calculations that are being put into it. Some of those examples would be some of the examples that they actually laid out were looking at the EU putting fines on U.S. tech companies on digital products. This would be like the Digital Services Act and things like that that's going on in the EU, right? Mm-hmm. Indonesian content laws disallow iPhones from being sold, right?
Really?
So that hurts American companies. Those are the types of things that are being put in here, not just are they tariffing us, are there these other external things that are also affecting our trade relations?
The question is how is that a scalpel calculation or not, right? Because the VAT tax is another great example. The VAT tax basically works is every time there's a commercial transaction, there's a consumption tax on that. So also B2B, and does an American part that's purchased, how do you actually calculate an American part that's purchased, moved to the EU, and then sold B2B as part of your tariff regime in response? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I don't know how you get to that number.
Some of this, because some of this, and this is the thing where it's if you actually kind of listen to people like the Commerce Secretary and the Treasury Secretary, that they're talking about these things in long form podcasts often, and what Besant, the Treasury Secretary, would say is a lot of the numbers that we're coming to, and he was saying this in March, so this was before the chart was ever revealed. He was saying things like a lot of the numbers that we're coming to, it's for us to show that we understand what the other countries are doing. And we want you to revise your policies. So there is an exertion of soft power here that is in order for us to have better trade relations, you have to stop doing these things.
I see. So this is really just anchoring the conversation at a really high rate, an absurdly high rate, to say this is what you're going to be looking at if we don't come to some kind of agreement. So this is a starting point to a negotiation.
And that's where some of the ChatGPT talk might be like, they might have, like, they're, as part of the negotiating tool, they might have just thrown what are some, for our strategy, what are some good highball numbers that we can throw in here? Like, there's a part of me that thinks that might be one of the reasons for that.
Right. Well, because all tariff rates aren't necessarily arbitrary, because the factors of production that affect the end user price is always up to consumer a subjective preference. So you don't really know what the right price rate is to get to trade balance at any given time. You have to discover that by moving the trade rate at any given time. Very hard to do, and very hard to do business planning when it's moving around all the time. So you have this weird, catch-22 if you're shooting for trade balance to try to capture that. Should you shoot for trade balance? Different question.
Yeah.
But if you are, a difficult thing to discover, because every time you move the trade rate, you're shocking the markets and you're making it harder to plan. You're doing all these things that make the inputs to the structures of production harder to predict.
Yeah. Do you think that the Trump administration expected the markets to respond the way they did to these announcements?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and Besson himself said it.
And
even in the Tucker interview, he was like, this is going to be a lot of short-term pain.
And what is the strategy behind that?
Actually, let me pull a clip. I think this shows the. This was one of the coldest clips I've ever seen from a Treasury Secretary, and I think it exactly shows where their thinking is for 2025 on the stock market. They're way more concerned with Treasury bonds at this point in time.
For sure.
So here is Secretary Besson. He's being asked. This is directly after the the conference with the tariff stuff, and it might require some explaining. But it's just a cold quote.
This kind of market downdraft so far this year is not concerning you.
Well, look, in my old business, I was very concerned about market movements, and I'm trying to be Secretary of Treasury, not a market commentator. What I would point out is that especially the NASDAQ peaked on Deep Seek Day. So that's a Mag 7 problem, not a MAGA problem.
So what that means for people that don't know, stock lingo, Mag 7 are the top 7 companies in the United States. It's like Facebook, Apple, Google, Amazon, Tesla. It's the Magnificent Seven,
The largest by market cap.
Yeah, and this was a big thing where when it came to stock trading and and all this stuff, there's been a large bet that's been being placed like in betting markets where it was essentially free money. Like, it was very obvious that this was going to happen. Is that will Mag 7 go under 30% of the total stock market? And it did. Savvy traders were very much expecting this to be the case. Like, everything has been signaling that this would be the case. They've been telling you that this would be the case, right? So a lot of the stock market, in shambles narrative stuff is just we all knew this was going to happen. They've been telling you that it was going to happen.
Yeah,
right?
I think when I said earlier that the 10% promise is mostly about the subjective evaluations of the people who were worried about a Kamala Harris thing being worse, and they were compromising with their sense of, okay, who do I support here between these two options, right? And then they kind of self-manipulated themselves into, I've seen 10% across the board. But then if you're heavily bought into Nike and they export out of Vietnam, and we're slapping a new 34%, not 10%, but 34% tariff on Vietnam, you're now oh my God. And that's 500,000 people in Vietnam work for Nike. The tremendous downstream effects of what that could mean. And I don't just mean in sympathy for the Nike employees, but rather in the sense of, once this is up and this gets cut way down, you're now into a really rough spot with all that new unemployed people in Vietnam, right? And now you got to rehire if the trade rate goes back down, and these are all just jamming up the process of production.
And what is the downstream effect for the consumer in that case?
Yeah, it means expensive shoes, unless
what just happened an hour ago, which this still has yet to be implemented. But Trump truthed out. He spoke his truth.
Spilled his tea.
He spoke his truth.
It's just a terrible name for a social media company, guys. I just hate it. I hate it.
It's truth. It's my voice.
It's the most liberal turn of phrase. I mean,
really
it is.
Yeah. But he said, just had a very productive call with To Lam, General Secretary of the Communist Party of Vietnam, who told me that Vietnam wants to cut their tariffs down to 0 all caps. If they are able to make an agreement with the U.S., I thanked him on behalf of our country and said I look forward to a meeting in the near future. So,
Okay.
because this is part of the thing is the tariffs as negotiating tool.
Right.
And this is also something that guys like Lutnick and Besant have been saying is that a lot of the goals with a lot of these tariffs is to bring everybody's tariffs down. They've been saying
Great.
that actively on podcasts and in interviews, right? And it's like, it seems like with some of these countries it's working. We'll see if it continues to work.
Well,
right?
and the historical case hasn't worked, right? In the historical case, it's always been said that we're going to increase tariffs now, we're going to decrease them later when everyone else does because we're getting ripped off. That's what we had this exact same argument at the turn of Smoot-Hawley tariffs.
Yeah.
Right. And in other eras prior to that as well, when tariffs were a bigger part of our national income. Now, I'm not saying Smoot-Hawley because it can be kind of used like the way, Hawks use. Smoot-Hawley can be used the way that by libertarians and liberals in the same way that World War II is used by Hawks to like justify any tariff increase is always bad because of Smoot-Hawley, right? So don't just set that aside.
There's a mousetrap issue that exists there often.
But it is the same. It is the same Lucy football thing that it is tempting idea, but does it actually play out when you get into the game theory of turning that ship around once you've turned there, right? And in the past it hasn't worked, but maybe it does this time. But Lucy might pull that football away.
So how different is the magnitude of these tariffs versus that era? Is the goal here to make them so extreme that it's like, okay, we literally can't afford this, so we have to come to the negotiating table now and get these things removed before they take effect because it'll just completely capsize, emerging economies?
I think so the short answer is yes. It's the change difference is bigger, but the tariffs were higher then, right? So the tariffs were already high compared to the post-WTO era that we entered in after World War II, going in through the Cold War. But the amount we're increasing it and the change of trajectory is so dramatic that it really dwarfs efforts like that.
Gotcha. So it might be part of the strategy to say we're going to make this so extreme that there's just no way they will abide this, and we'll come to the table and we'll bring them all down.
Yeah, but the question is whether or not the domestic politics of the country will tolerate that. Right?
In the short term with the market downturn.
Think about it.
and that
You're
sort of thing.
Vietnam. You're a former colonial state, and they're like, we're being held hostage by the United States. Like that's not cool. That you could have a rally around the flag. The exact same thing happened in Canada.
Yeah.
Right. We're seeing Canada move back to the left after being smashed by Justin Trudeau. Because Trump's rhetoric around tariffs and around making the 51st state. I know you support that policy, Kyle, but I'm still saying it's having deleterious effects. I'm worried about Canada for that sake.
That's fair.
You know what I mean?
I think Polyev is having bad effects on the whole conservative movement in Canada right now.
Interesting.
Yeah.
We'll have to get into that in a future episode. So you think that the potential is, and we wonder how widespread this might be, that countries will say, no, screw the U.S. We're gonna fight this.
Yeah.
China seems like they might be positioning for that too, and that's one of the areas where it'd be kind of scary.
Most concerning because we do import a lot.
They're like our third biggest trade partner.
Yeah.
But a lot of other countries seem to be capitulating, and Trump even himself. Here, I'll pull something from Trump. This was whoops, that's not what I wanted to pull. That was going to be a secondary thing. Trump.
I didn't even see it.
We'll hold off on that. Trump that night was talking about countries calling him about this.
Every country's called us. That's the beauty of what we do. We put ourselves in the driver's seat.
It's kind of low volume, but he's basically saying every country's called us. Every country's trying to negotiate right now. I won't play the full video because it's kind of quiet because of the airplane.
I can boost it.
But it is a thing where it's like literally every country has called him.
Bro, what?
There's the island of McDonald. All the penguins are calling him. But we also have things like Milei in Argentina is going to be moving to zero tariffs, right?
Amazing.
Mm-hmm. Israel has dropped their tariffs. They dropped them like the morning before, or is planning to drop their tariffs, right?
Yeah, quick question. We give them a lot of money. They're our, quote, number one ally. Why did they have tariffs on us in the first place?
Those are interesting questions.
To protect their domestic industries, for the same reason that everyone has tariffs. For the same reason the United States has been tariffing sugar, and that's why we have a corn industry as big as it does, and a subsidized corn industry at that, because we don't.
Yeah, but wouldn't you think somewhere in all the foreign aid that we give Israel, there would have been a clause of like, hey, don't have tariffs on our exports, bro. That's not how this works. Don't you think somebody would have the balls to say that?
No.
As a matter of fact, absolutely not.
You might find yourself on Daily Plaza if you do that sort of thing. Yeah. That's a joke. That's a joke.
Whoa. That's a JFK joke.
Yeah.
Really mind-blowing joke as well.
Yeah.
One area, one area here too is I'm seeing, and this is just kind of like a lot of the anti-Trump sycophants. They're putting these up. They're like, why wasn't Russia on the list? Why are we not tariffing Russia?
Because he's a Russian asset, Kyle.
Yeah, obviously.
That's
yeah.
obvious.
I mean,
That
didn't you
must
read
be
the
it.
Steele dossier?
Man,
I mean, come on.
Man, you're right. I didn't think about that.
Something Mueller.
And the reason is because we're already sanctioning them.
Yeah.
There's no trade.
There's no trade.
There's no trade to tariff. Right.
So should we open up trade so we can tariff them?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fuck yeah,
Just
why
so we
not?
can
Tariff trade is better than no trade. Right.
It's like your dad saying when you've done something bad as a kid, like, I'm going to kill you and then bring you back to life so I can kill you again. You know? No? Nobody else's dad said that?
Yes.
I don't think my dad ever said that. To
It
be
was
fair,
my
but
mom, but yeah.
That's
Thanks, Mom.
fair. Yeah. Love you, Mom. Love you, Dad.
But yeah, that is one of those things where you're just like, it just, sometimes the internet's annoying.
Yeah.
About this is you're not contributing to the conversation in any way talking about Russia here because there's no tariffs because we're not trading with them right now.
Or at least a very, very small amount, and you're in the middle of negotiations to try to end a war. So, I mean, if you're looking at it just looking at that dynamic, I'll give Trump some props. He's prioritizing ending killing people over his trade policy, which is pretty important to him. So not a small thing if that's indeed the motive.
That's fair. That's fair.
You have something?
No.
I was gonna skip to the next thing.
Do it.
Okay, so I do want to play some because I think it's very useful to hear from the people that are kind of the bigwigs in the Trump administration when it comes to the economic policies, to hear from them. I have some clips from Basent, who I've talked about multiple times on the podcast already. I think it would be useful to kind of just hear their takes of things that they were talking about in the lead up to all of this, and also kind of their attitudes of where the future of this lies. Because I think that helps understanding is like, trust the plan, you know? But
Right.
there is plans, and this is where their attitudes are currently, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, because everybody's just kind of like throwing things at the wall right now, and it's like, we can actually just listen to the people and what they're saying, right? So here is Scott on Meet the Press.
I can tell you, so April 2nd is going to be a big day.
This is on the
We're going to roll out the reciprocal tariffs. But what I can tell you, and I would encourage your viewers and the public and the media to follow, going into April 2nd, and already now we've seen some of our most imbalanced trading partners come forward and want to drop their tariffs. So by President Trump pushing forward with a tariff plan, reciprocal tariffs, if you drop yours, we'll drop ours. We are already seeing some of the worst offenders come down. April 2nd is an important day, but I would also tell everyone to look what happens from April 2nd to say June 30th as the other countries come down too. And President Trump's created a win-win situation here. Either the tariff barriers come down, the U.S. can export more, trade is fairer. It's always been free, but not fair. And then we, or if they don't do it, we'll take in substantial revenues.
Okay.
No, you won't. Taking substantial revenues.
No.
Well, yeah, because well, the reason why is because as the tariffs are priced in, people will buy less, and so then those companies will no longer sell in America, right? Especially at a 30% rate, much less the high ones like 60% and stuff like that.
Right.
Right. So, I mean, that depends on how elastic the demand is.
True.
And I'm not confident that it's that elastic for a 60% tax, right?
I would imagine not. Yeah.
Well, it depends on the product. It depends on a lot of those things, right?
Yeah.
Like, it is going to bring in revenue. It's just a matter of how much the revenue is actually going to be is the question. Because right now we only bring in like, I think the number is something like $50 or $60 billion in revenue from tariffs. Mm-hmm. And their goal, the stated goal of Howard Lutnick is to move that to more like, it was something like 500 billion, I believe.
Well, if everything were to go in and if trade were to persist as it currently is, I saw figures like $1 trillion. Mm-hmm. that would be enormous. But that's not our money. That's the government's money for them to spend. Right? So that's not like we get wealthier by $1 trillion. That means that Americans are taxed an extra $1 trillion.
Important question here, guys. Really quick before we move on. If this works, do you think we'll get to buy Toyota Hiluxes in the United States? Do you guys know what the Toyota Hilux is?
No, I don't know.
Oh, it's just the best truck ever.
Okay, what is that? Why is it so great?
Better than the Cybertruck?
Way better than the Cybertruck.
Whoa!
I'll have to pull up a picture. We'll come back to it. But it is not sold in the United States because of a chicken tax, a 25% tariff on imported light trucks that's been in place since the 60s to protect Ford and GM. And it's just the coolest fucking truck ever. Every insurgent in the Middle East drives a Toyota Hilux with a 50 cal in the back. It's just amazing.
Whoa,
it's
does it come with a 50 cal?
I don't think it comes with a 50 cal, but I bet you the aftermarket
In America,
would pop up.
in America it would.
It better.
Yeah, brother.
Hell yeah, brother.
That's the premium package. Anyways, we'll come back to the Hilux, but why don't you go ahead and play this next clip?
I want to pull one more clip, and this kind of just like showcases the plan here from Besson.
There's an old Soviet nuclear strategy called escalate to de-escalate. And fortunately, it was never, or so far hasn't been used. But I think with tariffs, you can escalate to, you can put tariffs on with the idea of getting rid of all the tariffs. There's an old Soviet nuclear.
I know that's the aim. The question is, can they actually reach their aim? And that's also the aim as declared by every pro-tariff person pretty much since Smoot-Hawley.
Because so here is, at least this is my assessment of the Trump economic plan, as far as I can tell from listening to all these people and what they're saying. And let me know, like, give pushback here on where you guys think the plan might go awry or whatever, right? So I'll just kind of like lay out some of the ideas here.
Do it.
So the general plan here is they're looking at U.S. is set to spend $6 trillion this year, while only bringing in $4 trillion. That's a problem.
Sure.
Right. And has been a problem.
Yep.
and that number just keeps widening every single year, right?
Where's our debt clock?
I could pull up the debt clock. Yeah. The Thomas Massey debt clock.
Yeah.
I think this one's a little bit behind schedule. It only says 36 trillion. I think we're higher than that now.
Gotta update it.
Yeah.
Probably. So there's kind of like four major points that they're trying to hit. One is increasing revenue. This is kind of everything in Howard Lutnick's job as Commerce Secretary. Tariffs is moving from $50 billion to $500 billion in revenue. That's kind of the goal here. But then you also have things like the gold card, selling U.S. citizenship to wealthy immigrants, stuff like that. That's set to make, I don't know what the estimates on that are right now, but they have some large estimate that's actually kind of surprising to me. Now, if they actually hit those estimates, that's another thing, right? But like, and that's all terms of external revenue collecting. That's not necessarily imposing a direct tax on citizens, right? Now, tariffs, we might argue, consumption tax, like there's that element where it brings prices up, but these aren't direct taxes on citizens, right? Then the other side of this tool is cut expenses. Doge, this is the Doge Elon stuff. Focus on waste, fraud, and abuse, make the government more efficient. The goal there, $1 trillion. Howard Lutnick and Elon Musk, they kind of famously have a bet here as who can reach $1 trillion faster. Howard Lutnick on $1 trillion in revenue, or Elon Musk on $1 trillion in Doge cuts. They're competing with each other over that right now.
That's tough.
Which is fun.
Well,
That's fun.
It's great. I love that competition. I want to see them both win. Isn't Elon going to be restricted by the fact that he kind of needs Congress to actually pass these things into a budget?
Both will be.
Both
will be.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. You actually need an actual budget process that has rescission.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And that to me is the hardest. Yeah, that thing to me right there is the most difficult part of this entire plan. Is like there's a lot of stages of all of the plan that require like Republicans to have majority and for them to be able to get things through Congress and yada. Like that's the hard part of all of this stuff. Like I see the logic of everything, and like that's where the rubber will meet the road to me.
Well, then wait a minute, one more. So if you get into a trade war and they put harm on our exports, and then we have to print dollars in order to subsidize our industry in order for them not to go bankrupt when they're exporters.
Yeah, that's a problem.
And it's been pretty clear, like to me that Besant's been saying, like, they want to do everything they can to stay away from having to print money, which is part of where we get into the yield stuff later. But so then the other thing is reduced taxes, no income tax on people under 150K. That'd be kind of dope if that happens. Corporate taxes going from 21 to 15%. I believe the tax bill is supposed to be coming through in the next 2 months is when they're going to be beginning to drop the tax bill in. But so we'll kind of see where the tax, like they haven't announced all of like the intricate details of all the tax bills. These are just the things that they've said publicly, right?
Yeah.
So, and we'll see. We probably won't get everything we want because there'll have to be compromises. Like that's how that always works, right? But that'll be the other. And then the other side is just regulatory burdens, making it sexier for businesses to operate in the United States.
Right. Well, and I think that's the number one argument for people saying they're doing things out of order, right? And you've said this, David, that how can you expect to say not buy Canadian timber and want to produce that domestically when the EPA policies and regulations say that it's extremely difficult to do that,
and
almost
the
impossible.
Forest Service specifically there, but yeah, EPA is another one.
Sure.
The National Environmental Protection Act is the number one barrier to building anything, period. And you need a congressional bill to change that. So what do you do? Right. So I think they're gambling on the idea, well, we can't get Congress to do anything, so we're going to do everything we can to try to do it on ourselves just so we can set the right track. And then maybe if we're lucky enough, in 2 years, we can get the majority that we need. The question is, can they get there in that?
Well, right,
period?
especially if they're doing things that are harming consumer confidence and people's portfolios. They're seeing the economy go down by way of, looking at the stock market as a proxy.
Yeah.
Inflation is still high. Prices are still high. People are still suffering in that way. Will they have the public support to actually get the majority they need by doing all these things first?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, and the next big thing and where a lot of the crisis lies for 2025 right now, and this is where, in my opinion, the biggest part of the plan and probably the most important part of the plan, and everybody's kind of hyper-fixated on the tariffs, but in some ways tariffs help this a little bit because they drive the 10-year down, the 10-year bonds. Because so what Yellen, the former Treasury Secretary under Biden, did was she just took out a bunch of short-term debt, like $4 trillion worth of short-term debt that's all set to mature in 2025. On top of the rest of the debt that's set to mature in 2025, to the point where there's about $10 trillion in debt, $9 to $10 trillion in debt that's set to mature this year. So all of that
what
has
does
to be
maturity mean
refinanced.
for those that aren't aware?
Basically, the Treasury has to sell bonds again, like has to massively sell bonds
At current interest rates.
Yeah, at current interest rates,
which are higher than they were then.
Exactly. Right. So, and when Trump came into office, or when Trump got elected, Treasury bond, the rate on the 10-year just skyrocketed through the roof. It went up to like 5%. And what Besant's strategy right now, and when the tariffs were announced, there was a massive sharp downturn that happened. It dropped below 4%, and the goal is to get it down to 3.5, if not 3. And the thing here is every basis point that it drops. A basis point is the 0.1, so 0.1, 0.2, that's basis point. Every basis point that the yield drops, that's saving $100 billion about in future interest payments.
Right. So if the U.S. government had to refinance their debt at current interest rates, it would be a tremendous amount of interest, like a crippling amount of interest. Not that it isn't already. So they're trying to bring that down so they can refinance the debt at a lower rate for a longer term to basically stabilize our debt situation. Am I getting that right?
That's the argument.
Yep. That is exactly what's going on right now. Yeah, because we're talking because we're sitting at a point where the interest rate is starting to get to be $1 trillion a year. Isn't it like $1 trillion a year now at this point? We should pull up the debt clock. I'll pull up the debt clock.
Yep.
But so this is another one of the angles that they're tackling. So like what they're doing is they have all these different like legs of a stool, and like all of those legs need to work together. And the difficult part of this plan and where the gamble of the plan is if one of those legs is cut out, it makes the other stuff like
pretty weak.
That's the gamble that we're operating under right now, right? Where it's like I can see the logic where if everything works out, like the golden age might be upon us, right? The problem is I'm worried. That's where
if
I'm
it doesn't,
worried.
you're looking at stagflation, big recession, that sort of
problems.
But it's also one of these things where something has to be done. And we could like if they weren't doing a lot of this stuff, we're just taking all this new debt. We're just taking on all this new debt, and the interest rate is just going
still printing money.
Yeah.
We're careening towards
we just go into QE,
national default. the loss of the dollar's reserve currency, like the whole hyperinflation path.
Yeah, exactly. So like, and everybody's like super concerned about the stock market, and that's why I pulled up the clip of him saying that's a Mag 7 problem. Is like, the stock market is not the concern. They're willing to temporarily sacrifice the stock market for the sake of bonds at this point in time because of how much of the debt is maturing.
Sure.
Yeah.
Right.
And when you look
makes
at
sense.
people right now, a lot of the rhetoric is, well, the stock market's going down, and that's people's retirement, and that's really bad for those people, et cetera, right? They're doing the sympathy play for retirees. It's understandable. But those same retirees, if they're going to be around in a year, and all of a sudden we're looking at really bad inflationary problems because of, the amount of money printed in order to cover the debt interest payments, then they'll also be in a bad situation because the things that they buy are going to be more expensive due to the money printing.
Yeah.
Interest on debt over $1 trillion.
Yeah, there you go.
1 trillion, 15 billion.
How's Doge doing? Almost 280 billion. Nice. Not bad.
Savings per taxpayer, 2,400.
Yep.
Almost 25.
Just taking a little bitty bite out of the debt per taxpayer of about 323,000.
Yeah, so like that to me is like, that's the structure of understanding the whole plan. Then there's also, coming from the Treasury Secretary, he has his own 333 plan is what he calls it. And it's 3% real GDP growth. So that's the,
Growth of the economy.
Yep.
Production.
And that would be high. We've not gotten above 3% in a
the
while.
projected growth rate is 1.9. So the goal is 3.
Room for improvement.
Right. But like that's like under Biden, it was like 1.5, right? So like,
And the other thing that's
trying
going
get
to be
that
a
high.
headwind for that is the reduction in government spending, because currently isn't government spending calculated into GDP?
Yeah.
So with the reductions that Doge is proposing, if those actually do come to pass, that would be reducing GDP.
And that's the second 3 of the 333 plan.
Nice.
Is dropping budget deficit to 3%, currently at 6.5%. So in order for that, massive spending cuts have to be done. So there's the Doge end of the stool.
Wow.
right?
So they really have to see a tremendous amount of economic growth to make up for a 50% cut in government spending and achieve that 3% GDP rate.
And the final 3 of the 333 plan, 333. I'm just the salesman for the 333 plan.
But wait, there's more.
But wait, there's more. The final one is 3 million barrels of oil per day. U.S. produced.
Hell yeah, brother.
Hell yeah, brother. Drill, baby, drill. right? And that is reduce energy costs, reduce prices of things, et cetera, right?
Yep.
That in itself has its own downstream effects, right?
Yep.
So like that all in a total, in a nutshell, is kind of like at least how I see the plan being. Trust the plan, right?
Yeah. Do you trust the plan, David?
No. Well, if anything, I understand the concern. The question is like, how skeptical are you on their ability to cut the budget for real, to coordinate with Congress to do so? And we have a great recent, representation of that when they could have done rescission in the last CR, but they didn't.
Well, and
So,
part of the
yeah.
plan was that.
Yeah.
On that was, and I was more so on Thomas Massey's side. I feel like we should just cut this funding on a lot
Yeah.
of this Biden stuff. For sure.
Or even pass rescission. You don't even have to cut the funding,
Yeah.
right? Rescission can go in and pass at 51.
What is
with the
rescission?
it just gives the executive authority to cut budget. That's all you had to do. And Republicans voted not to.
Why?
Because they're big government Republicans.
Well,
You got 20 votes in the Senate that are just completely captured by the state.
A lot of the plan was like promises kept from the previous administration, and then we're moving on. The next go around will be the our time situation, and that's when the major cuts will be happening.
And supposedly it was the supposed kill shot argument was that if they didn't do the CR, they couldn't put in rescission in the CR. Then the government would shut down and Doge couldn't continue to work. Right? That was the argument. But I think that's a highly manipulated argument. All they had to do was put in rescission and insist on it. And if Trump can't whip the votes of 20 Republican senators, and he's the most popular Republican in the country, what are we talking about here? And then he went and endorsed Lindsey Graham and said to primary Thomas Massey. So, I mean, like, so that's like, how confident are you in their ability to actually execute this plan? Right?
But most of the stuff is like everything on the executive side all makes sense to me. Think it can be done.
Yeah.
Everything that's required on the congressional side,
Not a shot.
I'm like, that's where I'm kind of like, I'm open to it. but I have my concerns.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
that's
sure.
that's where the
Well, yeah. I mean, you want to give them the best, the benefit of the doubt to the greatest degree you can, but you also have to respond to the facts of what their actual actions are, not just their words. Right? They can say all day, "Our goal is to do this." The question is, will they actually, make the sacrifices necessary to do so?
well, and there's also the short-term pain for long-term gain strategy is what are the consequences on the midterms for that?
Right.
Right.
And that's the biggest question because really getting a lot of this stuff through Congress is going to depend on the Republicans winning in the midterms, which, what is the record of an incumbent administration or the incumbent party making gains in a midterm?
Not good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's also things like a lot of the market stuff is, in my opinion, so overblown. As somebody who watches markets, like the market is just it's basically back to where it was when Trump got elected. Like that's where the market has gone back to.
Yeah.
It's like everybody's like we went into this super hype bubble on the lead up to Trump becoming in office, and now we're back to where it was back in like November.
Yeah.
It's like even like the people in like the crypto spaces where it's like everybody's just like, oh, is this your crypto president? Because Bitcoin dropped from almost 110,000 to 80,000. It's like, yeah, but in November Bitcoin was 60,000.
Yeah.
You're like. Like,
I'm still waiting on that
have
60,000.
a little perspective. I think we're going to retest 74 and then we're going to kick back up again. So I don't think we're going to hit the 60. I think you had a good idea on your bet, but I don't think 60 is the number.
Well, we will see.
Not financial advice. So at least a part of that I think is important to know is that the stock market is not the economy.
Mm-hmm.
It is a representation of people's future expectations for the economy.
Right.
So it's understandable that the stock market would go down. A lot of the meme making in that space, I think, is causing a lot of panic.
Mm-hmm.
People should be, chill out.
And they want the liquidity to flow into bonds. That's part of the plan here. And that's how you drive the rate down. You need to increase the demand for the 10-year. And economic uncertainty is how you do that. because that's how you move people out of the stock market into the bonds.
Right.
For a more reliable return, because So that does. It's both true simultaneously that the stock market is not the economy, but when the stock market goes down, there are retirees who are gonna be hurt by that. It's also true that the tariff regime will be devastating to some sectors of the economy, hopefully in the short term. Right, but whether or not the trade deal works out, that's up to the executive to really figure out unless the courts stop them. But they don't have the best track record of being able to actually do this, right? Because remember we did this in 2016 to 2020, right? It didn't remake our economy then. Like, do we have manufacturing jobs more now than then? Some.
The argument that would be made is just all the extra stuff that was going around the Trump administration where things just weren't able to happen before. Whereas like bad administration around him, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah,
that stuff,
all
right?
those arguments.
Where now you have actually some like actual savages like Besant in play.
Yeah.
For people, Besant was the guy that devised the strategy for Soros to break the Bank of England. He was the analyst on that job. Right? like this guy gets markets. Like he's very smart.
So you're saying we have a Soros guy at Treasury?
Well, because it was like a three-pronged team. It was like Soros, the risk manager, and then you had like Besant and Druckenmiller.
He had a rough childhood. He's chopped off some heads. He's reformed now.
He's reformed.
He's all grown up.
He's all grown up.
But he was the lead analyst on there, right?
Now he's the president of Syria.
But it's one of those things where people will be like, "Oh, he's a Soros guy." It's like, no, he's not a Soros guy. He's his own guy. Like
Who worked for Soros?
Worked with Soros. Like that's a very different thing, right?
Okay, fair. We don't need to play.
Before Soros was Soros, right?
Yeah.
Too. Like we didn't mean the same thing at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah,
This is pre-open society and all this stuff.
I'm so
right?
curious what the Helix thing. I don't know what we're talking about.
I put a link in there.
What is
Here,
going
I'll
on?
pull this up.
I don't do automobiles.
Yeah, you do.
I don't know it.
Okay.
I don't know what's automobiles in other countries.
The Toyota Hilux.
This is a car. This is a car, David.
No,
it's an automobile.
This is a light truck.
It's a truck,
actually.
not
No,
a car.
but sorry.
I do that on between cars and trucks, guy.
Sorry. What I meant to say is like this is an automobile for you, David. Like it's like your car.
Okay.
It drives on four wheels.
4 wheels? Wow. Is it transmission?
So this is a
gonna mute
diesel light truck. This one, I believe, is sold in Indonesia. It's currently not legal to drive in the U.S. Because of like some safety stuff.
Because of chickens?
because of like airbags. But they're not sold in the United States. They're sold everywhere. They're made in Japan, sold in Japan, Europe, the Middle East. It's like the most popular truck in the world. But we can't have them in the United States because of a chicken tax, a tariff, 25% tariff from forever ago.
Wait,
like 1964.
explain to me what does the chicken tax have to do with this?
So it was. I will pull it up. I had it. I had it on Grok. Let's see if I can get back to that answer. So you can't buy a Toyota Hilux in America, primarily due to a combination of economic, regulatory, and strategic factors. The biggest hurdle is the chicken tax. It's a 25% tariff on imported light trucks that's been in place since '64. It was originally a retaliation against European tariffs on American chicken exports, but it stuck around to protect U.S. automakers like Ford and GM. The Hilux is manufactured overseas, primarily Thailand, Japan, other countries. And importing it would slap a really ridiculous tax on top of it, making it obviously just far less competitive in North America versus like the Tacoma. But the thing is, it's a diesel truck. It's amazing. It looks so badass. This one particularly from Indonesia. And there are people who are actually talking about like, we could import them. We could, if you like did a bulk import, you could just like agree to pay the tariff and then have somebody retrofit all the safety stuff that you need onto it, and then it would be street legal.
Huh.
I don't know. I just feel like a good old Tesla truck, Cybertruck, because I'm an American.
That is infinitely sexier than
I'm
the
an
Cybertruck.
American.
Yeah.
Look at
also,
that.
they can't remote turn it off, Kyle.
I will own one. I will own one day.
There
And
you
this
go.
is a message directly to the Trump administration. Tear down this frickin' wall, dude.
with Indonesia.
Does it pass CAFE standards? Like it has a high enough miles per gallon in order to.
No idea.
Oh, okay. That's
Don't
usually
care.
another major barrier. So, like for example, in India, some cars are sold with older engines, like you say like an engine from like 2003 today, right? And those old engine designs no longer qualify for CAFE standards, but they sell them for like $10,000. So if they're imported to the United States with a low tariff rate, that would mean your average person could buy a $10,000 brand new car.
Yes, and these are rolling off the line at like 16 to 20, which is infinitely cheaper than the equivalent. You look at
90,000 or
You
more?
look at a Toyota Tacoma right now, base level, it's like $35,000 to $40,000. It's insane. But anyways,
Opposed to a $90,000 Tesla Cybertruck.
yeah, yeah, true.
Yeah, Kyle's just showing his elite.
So I'm
crypto
almost
cred over here.
I'm almost positive this would not have a DEF tank, so it would not like abide by current EPA standards for diesel vehicles.
Another reason to abolish the EPA.
Amen, brother. Look, you got me. I'm here for it, man.
Yeah, there we go. So what is next? What happens? What's our predictions? What are our speculations? We're getting to the dubious speculation part. Don't hold us accountable for what I'm about to say.
This is the part where you can just take all of this with a grain of salt. Who knows? Who knows?
Recession, definitely. At least a short term. Right?
Well, how do you define recession, David?
Well, I think we're going to see. Unemployment is going to be nasty
It's
with those
it's
responding
a unique
tariffs.
definition that mutates.
Thank you, Kyle.
High unemployment with difficult abilities in an inelastic job market, right? When you have uncertainty in the market, it's difficult to expand operations, right? If you don't know where your inputs are coming from, yeah. We got a buddy who's working all this weekend now because they get parts from China, right? So he's got to rework everything he does.
That's exciting.
Well, I mean, but what do you do if
In a
you're the
bad way.
business owner there? You're like, whoa, hold on, I'm not going to expand business now. So how do you get that 2%, 3% growth?
Right.
Now, maybe over the long run, they can turn that ship around, but they're like charting a course through these rocks.
Yeah.
There's gonna be recession.
It's rocky short term
For sure. I mean, yeah. Do you think there will be supply chain disruptions?
For sure, 100%.
So, I mean, just an anecdote. There was a very, very successful steel building company here in Bozeman, Bridger Steel. They went out of business during COVID. They had millions, tens of millions of dollars in work on the table, but they couldn't fulfill any of it because they couldn't get screws. They got all their screws from China. They couldn't get screws, so they had to forego all this business, and they ended up closing their doors. So
Wow.
you hope that you don't
You
see
mean
some
the
more
steel
things.
tariffs that Trump implemented didn't protect them from this?
apparently there should have been domestic screw manufacturing implemented prior to that.
But that's the challenge of central planning, right? Is you don't know the collateral consequences of the action. Right. So there's going to be tremendous. I mean, the other prediction. Sorry, Kyle. Is the downstream effects will be difficult to predict and very profound. Like effects on individuals in any given industry at any given time.
That is the struggle. Is there's going to be such a lag effect on some of the things that they want to happen, and like because right now they're kind of signaling like, come here, build in America. We're gonna have the best tax rates for you. You're not going to be hit by the tariffs, et cetera. So like everything is to be like if you're doing your thing, come do it here, right?
And
but it takes a while to build that here, right? So like that's the lagging effect that's going to be in
10
place.
years, right? A good one is like the chip man, like we did the whole CHIPS Act under the Biden administration. Those aren't still operating. Those still aren't operating. They haven't got online yet.
And
well, it takes time.
You might have to build somewhere close to a wetlands.
You do?
So you got to do environmental protection study, and that'll take 3 years.
I was like, you have to build chips next to a wetland?
No,
why?
well, maybe you need the water cooling. But I'm just saying, like, what do you, like, there's an incredible array of institutional barriers to building anything here that you have not addressed.
Yeah.
And cannot address because it takes congressional action, unless you declare an emergency like he's doing with the AI stuff.
Yeah.
Right? Like the AI projects that he announced, like the project Stargate. That project was done under an emergency declaration in order to speed up the building so that we can be competitive in AI. The question is, can you scale that to the size of the economy we have and the size of the people we have when the amount of diverse planning is there? Very difficult to do. So you have all these institutional barriers for regular people, but if you're close to the Trump administration, then you can get that emergency declaration and build something big, right? So what another collateral consequence of this? Huge concentration of large corporations get special benefits, special favors, getting their little piece of the pie taken out of these like broad-based tax rates and get exemptions, right? So that's going to be another one. If you're a lobbyist in DC right now, you're just rolling in the dough, rolling in it because everyone's coming to you. If you got any amount of influence in the Trump administration, you're going to be able to charge enormous rates, $1 million a day to go say, I'm going to talk to JD about how we can get an exemption on whatever thing that your mangoes or whatever, your mango importation industry.
This is the trade-offs of centralization versus decentralization. Is centralization allows you to move much faster, and the emergency powers are allowing for more centralization. And because if you look at what the Trump admin is saying, and the people in the admin, all these people that I keep referencing here, but like they're the guys, right?
Yeah.
Is like Scott Bessent has said that this is going to be a 10-year plan for a revision of the world economic order. Like that is the words that he used. Is that we are changing the economic order. Like everybody's mental models around these things are thinking that the status quo is going to be the norm, and then we're just shifting a few variables on the status quo. No, the change is like the game is going to be changing. That is the long-term area of where they're moving. But in order to kind of get there faster, they're trying to force the hands with things like these national emergencies to be able to move fast, because decentralization is slow. It's often more defense. Like centralization is an offensive strategy. Decentralization is a defensive strategy. And right now they're an offense, right?
Sure.
And so like that is kind of the thing of what we're seeing with the chips and the AI stuff is they're trying to get these snappy, moving snappy.
And that's all well and good, but I wonder about the soundness of a strategy that is projecting a 10-year plan in an administration that only lasts 4 years.
That's the concern, right?
Right, and if we're still in shambles in 4 years, but we're on the trajectory to get to the 10-year plan, and it's going to work out, in 2 more administrations.
Trump's going to run another term.
Well, obviously.
Repeal the 22nd, I guess.
Can you get that kind of plan through? Can you keep your party in power long enough to have some continuity so that you can actually continue?
That is kind of the thing. It's like you almost need JD to be the next president, right? For these things to move, with Republicans continuing to win, and then you having the people of this mindset be the ones that continue to grow in power, right? Like you need that political power to kind of keep things moving, I think, for the plan to work on this decade timescale that they're looking at.
But imagine in 4 years we get AOC as president, right? and how far off that'll throw the plan. But on trade,
can't even picture
you don't
that.
know where they're going to go.
I could not even picture that.
It would be like picturing a TV host being president as of in 2015.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean,
that's
they're trying to AstroTurf AOC hard right now. They're funneling as many people into these venues with her and Bernie right now to like the Democrats still got it, and like it's very clear that it's AstroTurf.
still got it.
Well, but it's very clear that it's AstroTurf. Like every time the Democrats do this, people run the diagnostics on the
cell phone
data,
Yeah.
right? And it's like they're the same people at every event, right?
Yeah, like 60% of the people at the Bernie AOC rally were also at like one or more Kamala rallies. And you're like, what?
Yeah. Well, they're like
it's quite AstroTurfed, right?
Yeah, they're like deadheads, They just
just tour.
Yeah, they just tour.
They just get on the bus and do a bunch of drugs.
group
Just
signs.
DNC groupies.
So one of the reasons I said recession is recessions are typically defined by higher unemployment, right, or depressions, right. Those sorts of phenomena usually happen the worst when you have responding tariffs. So China responds with another tariffs that crashes the export markets. The export markets then have to cut back because they no longer have places to sell to. If that happens, we could see substantial either bailouts or unemployment. That's the only options. If you have bailouts, then you have the spending problem. Mm-hmm. Right. And then you have the upward pressure on prices from tariff inputs, and you have the upward prices of more money printing, and you have the bailouts on top of that.
Inflation.
Yeah. So
Good for
working
asset
through the
prices.
logic of it, but yeah.
Denominated
and then
in
you have the
dollars.
other ones like stimulus checks and things like that, where is that going to be the other response? Because that's how we've responded typically. I mean, even the Bush steel tax tariffs, and then 9/11 and all that caused a stimulus check, right? That was cut back then. So will that be the other go-to policy? Could be.
Good question.
Yeah.
I hope not.
And then the other question, so they're predicting a return to American manufacturing, right? But what about all the things we can't make? I mean, literally can't make, right? Mm-hmm. We can't make cocoa beans. We don't have the climate for it. So
Hydroponic farming, bro.
Yeah.
You can grow shit indoors.
That's a lot more expensive than growing it outside where it grows naturally in nature.
Well, there's also just certain elements of the competitive nature of like the cost of some of these things to move over, where like China has made things super highly automated on various aspects, and like we would have to, because like I saw this clip recently of Ronald Reagan talking about tariffs, and he was talking about like this exact problem where he was saying that like if the tariffs come in place and we're doing these protectionist policies on the American workers, the companies don't have the incentive necessarily to compete on the same level when it comes to like automating stuff so like our innovation in that sphere for our manufacturing won't be as strong as it necessarily has to be, because the tariffs are kind of adding that protective layer there.
Yeah.
Right.
So
like it is one of these things where like, to me, it's like the tariffs could be used as a short-term strategy to get the market moving in the direction that you need it to be. But then you're going to want to like make it so that they can be as competitive as possible, right?
Totally.
So like you get the market started, and then you like pull back those the protectionism there, and then you let them roll.
It's the government equivalent, the economic equivalent of a snowplow mom. You just clear the way for your kid. They never have to face any adversity, and then they grow up to be a snowflake.
That's why a lot of our industry is really old and hasn't been updated for a long time. We make steel in ways that are pretty much the same way that we made steel in the 1950s, where all around the world, emerging economies are making steel in much more efficient, much more automated ways. They're much safer in many other ways, and we don't do that. Why? Because of unions and tariffs. Sugar, same story. We can make sugar in the United States. Not a lot of the land mass can make sugar, but we do. We protect the hell out of it. And that's why we have the corn subsidies that we do, right? In order to make up for our deficits on sugar. So that is all the collateral consequences of trade policy. It doesn't just end there. Now, the pro-trade advocate or pro-tariff advocates will say, well, we protect these things in order to protect American jobs and American culture, so we can kind of use DC to make sure that the average working man can have the kind of standard of living we think they should have. Understandable and laudable goal. The challenge is what are the collateral consequences of that? Because those are the same arguments they made to protect sugar in the first place. Right, to protect it from the little tiny sugar in Florida, from the Caribbean and from South America.
Yeah.
Right, and the consequence of that is now your corn syrup is in everything.
So Bobby Kennedy's got some opinions on
No,
trade balance.
I doubt that. But but that's I'm just saying like those connections also have downstream effects that you cannot predict and are very difficult.
Yeah.
Coffee, banana, mangoes, vanilla, cashews, pineapples. We can't grow those here. So what's going to happen to those?
Damn millennials won't get their avocado toast.
Yeah. Man, I freaking love avocados. I don't do avocado
What are you, a dirty
toast,
lid?
Yeah.
but I love avocados. They're so good.
Avocados are a dog whistle for socialism.
All right, absinthe.
Absinthe?
We literally can't make absinthe here. It's illegal.
That's fine.
Absinthe is awesome.
I never drink it anyways.
Oh man, it's good.
I do drink tequila though.
Fireworks, rare raw milk cheese.
What?
We can't get those here.
Raw milk?
Yeah,
What?
raw
Yeah.
milk cheese.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I buy it from a dairy down in the Bitterroot Valley.
It has to be long aged, otherwise it's not legal.
Oh, well,
Yeah.
that's fine. But
Yeah.
that's a different story.
Joe's
right?
like, oh, yeah, I don't know anything about that.
I lost all my cheese in a boating accident. No, sorry, short aged raw milk cheese is you can't do. But I mean, and I'm just saying there are barriers to these things. If you lower the barriers first, then you can actually manufacture those things.
Oh,
here.
absolutely, yes.
There's some stuff with like tequila, for example. Like we're not allowed. We have a very small land growth that can grow agave and make it in the way that's actually technically tequila. Things like that. So you eliminate those barriers, and we could. But you can't eliminate the barriers to climate. Like climate is where things grow, and you can't change that. Hydroponics might be able to, but that's expensive. And high water usage. We have water problems in a lot of the United States.
Desalination. Next.
More energy input. So I'm just
Nuclear.
saying.
Next.
We should just let the environment get warmer.
Yeah.
And then we can grow more sugar.
Yes. Global warming promotes production of avocados and pineapples and agave in America. This is what we want, people.
This is the future that we voted for. We voted for more global warming. Let's make it happen.
Drill, baby,
We're
drill.
pro-growth here.
That's right.
I'm kind of cold lately. I'm pretty comfortable with that. Anyways,
Absolutely.
So,
All right.
future prediction, Kyle. I mean, you think they're going to make it? What's the story? What's the end result here?
I would not be so. I have certain areas of concern
Yeah.
that I'm open to being wrong on, and I would not be surprised if there's a much different conversation in 2026, and all of a sudden people start being. See, I was always pro-tariff. I would not be surprised if we end up seeing that because a lot of these negotiations come through and are successful. But there's a lot of things where it's like A plus B equals C, and like we need A and B to happen. So
Yeah.
like it's one of these things where I have some skepticism, but I also have some like cautious optimism. I'm not in a this is terrible or this is amazing road.
Yeah.
I'm a fence sitter.
Yeah,
We know this about you.
I do get that. When I think you're projecting the right amount of appropriate skepticism while saying this is the plan and this is the direction they're going, and remaining calm. Right, like that's the whole just the big remain calm. Be British. One of the interesting.
I just like the
parts-
British. We talked about this before we started recording.
One of the interesting parts of this is the way that the rhetoric is changing on this stuff too. I find that really interesting. The amount of people who are like suddenly pro-tariff, the amount of people who are suddenly very anti-tariff. Watching the left articulate market processes for the first time clearly has been very entertaining to me. Like, for the first time, they're like, "Did you know regulatory costs have consequences? Taxes raise the prices of things."
No,
It's like,
people were showing.
what is this?
People were showing clips of Nancy Pelosi and Bernie Sanders talking about how we need to implement all these tariff models back like 20 years ago, and there were like absurdly high price rates on it. Like there were these clips of them doing this. It was like young Nancy Pelosi.
So are you saying we're slowly infiltrating the left with good ideas? And eventually, on a long enough time scale, the left is going to be the new Libertarian Party? Because all of Trump's policies are just slowly turning them libertarian?
So something I will.
I don't know about that.
Something I will add, and this is maybe my final thought because we are running long, is an area of perhaps steel manning protectionist policies on somebody who is typically much more on the free trade end is. And this is actually from a foreign policy perspective, where I've watched what's happened to other countries on the foreign policy end and how wars and changes in the geopolitical structure have completely decimated their economies. And there is an element of like, maybe there's a spectrum of free trade and protectionism that exists, and you want to find the correct balance there, because if things happen on a geopolitical level, all of a sudden everything just like goes into turmoil and it just completely screws up with your economy. Like when
Right.
you are so globalistically free trade and then there's a change that happens, all of a sudden it's just like, so if
Right.
you don't have that kind of like protective base there that allows you to still kind of like produce the thing that you need or whatever.
Yeah.
That's an area that I would steal because, like, and I'll even just look at it from a small country. Is what we did to Yemen was literally told them like, let's just make 90% of your production coffee, and then we completely decimated them away from the free trade globalist trade structure.
Right.
And then all they had was coffee when the entire world sanctioned them.
Right.
Right.
And they were starving because they had no food
Now,
production.
America doesn't have that problem per se because we're the empire, but like there is those types of things that are worth being considered on the protectionist
But
side.
that's the question. Is one of the other better arguments with this, or maybe even against it, is the implementation of a lot of trade protectionism typically comes at the end of an imperial cycle.
Mm.
If it is true for Holland, Denmark, and the UK before us.
Where was
very-
Rome at on this?
It didn't have the kind of trade expertise, yeah, import duties and stuff like that. But that's mostly. But still, like I don't know. But I'm still saying that.
Well,
It's
there's
an
when,
interesting
when,
pattern.
When,
So is
when
this,
Russia-Ukraine happened, wheat went like freaking crazy for a lot of countries. Like,
Yeah.
like there were a lot of countries that were extremely dependent on Ukrainian wheat.
Right.
Yeah.
Egypt was one of them, actually. Like Egypt's wheat market just went like wild off the rails.
There's an
when it
overlay
happened,
of a
right?
spectrum of fragility to resilience
Exactly.
with globalism, right? It's more potentially more fragile, and this is you can see this at the micro scale within a singular business. It's operating very lean, to all the way up to the scale of global trade.
Yeah, because like a lot of times I think the free traders, they exist too much in a utopian mindset on this of like, if everything's perfect and everything's free trade, like then oh my God, it's going to be amazing. But like sometimes like there's almost like a little bit of a protectionist buffer to be used against utopian fantasies,
Right.
That's an area where that's why I think I'm a little bit more open to some of these things where I kind of like see the concerns.
Right.
That
I mean,
being
with
laid out,
a
right?
relatively realistic perspective of the world that we're living in and the geopolitical dynamics that we exist within, is it a good idea to have all of our pharmaceuticals or the vast majority made in China? Like, I don't know. Like, maybe not. Or like.
There's a
chips
strategic
Well, it depends on the
discussion
question
there.
you're asking for. If you're in the place where you're thinking we will eventually go to war with China because of some trap that is necessarily happens because of the zeitgeist of history, then yeah, that's a bad idea. But if you think that trade makes peace, then it's a great idea.
I
Because we're
agree
dependent
with
on
you.
them for our pharmaceuticals. So I'm just saying.
I think that's
agree
a
with
little
you.
bit too dogmatic. Trade makes peace. I think that's a little too
Well,
dogmatic.
no, wait. So
Right,
I'm only saying. Wait a minute. You're using a model and embedding premises, and then I say, well, there's other premises. You're like, well, that's dogmatic. Well, so is yours, right? So is the trap.
Let me explain what I'm saying. It's like because that's a very dogmatic heuristic that libertarians always jump to is trade makes peace. Trade makes peace. Trade makes peace. And it's like. Yes, it tends to make more peaceful relations, but it doesn't just like automatically say that there's going to be peace. So you need to have protection against that in some way, right? Like you need to have like a buffer zone.
My point
That's the thing that I'm saying.
is the inevitable we will go to war with China also exists on the same amount of dogmatism and assumptions of this is the way that.
But that's not
things have
the
to go.
argument that I'm making for
I know
maybe
you're
a
not.
little
I'm
bit
saying
of
that's
it, right?
embedded in the fear of another country manufacturing a good that we like.
I agree. And really what I'm saying is within a realistic frame of understanding that that's where our government is at, right? Our government and people within it are saying, they're saber rattling against China. They're saber rattling against whomever in the world. This is a reality in which we live. In a perfect world, yes, there would be no concern of going to war with China, but there kind of is. And so I'm just saying, with that frame that we're living in currently, it might not be the best idea to have really fundamental goods that our country relies upon almost solely in the hands of the production hands of a country whom we might be at war with.
And also
you want to do some trade with them, right? Like you want to do trade, and that helps because like trade is good. Trade helps bring down costs, etc.
Yes.
Like all of that stuff. But like you also want to have those kind of guardrails set up in case of an emergency. Like you want to have an emergency fund,
Right.
Of pharmaceuticals or
Resilience.
of whatever. Yeah,
Resilience.
that's kind of what I'm saying. There is like there is a realism that exists there that is kind of a protection against like the utopian free trade model. Because
Right.
like I think a lot of the free trade model becomes very utopian in its nature,
Yeah.
as much as I agree with it ideologically in a lot of ways, right?
So another utopian idea is this idea that you will necessarily have a balance of trade.
Sure.
Yeah.
It makes no sense. There's no sense to it.
I agree.
In this, what we're discussing today isn't a targeted trade about strategic goods that we're reliant on and worried that we couldn't manufacture here because we've made it impossible to manufacture things here. This is about
there are strategic targets on the tariff model.
Well, those are on top of these, right? So that's like the baseline China stuff that was already addressed in January. But this aim is for trade balance, as if that is itself was a desirable goal, and it isn't clear that it is.
Sure.
Right? Because their model is that the United States is one big business, and if we spend out money, that's a bad thing. And what that means is that people have provided us goods.
Sure.
So, like, and at the end of the day, is that actually an aim worth shooting for? We've skipped right past that, but making the point in my libertarian dogmatism that there is that perhaps this is not quite the right aim, but if it winds up in overall reduced trade, tackling the deficit, things like that, I can see that.
We could also get a better deal on those goods.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Like that's the other thing. It's like it's not just that they're sending us goods and that's great, but we could get better
exports, right? And then if they lower theirs for our exports, but in the meantime, who gets screwed out of the deal is the export markets, and then the responding tariffs with the import markets. So once you're looking at that, then you're saying, well, there's a lot of deadweight loss here if we don't wind up with the eventual negotiation of a lower trade deal with less barriers.
Right.
But it is also this place is like, how far can we actually take that? Because we're hypocrites in this. Because we are a larger trade. We have a lot of trade and protectionist policies too, like steel tariffs or like the protecting like
chicken
trucks.
tax.
Chicken taxes.
Which we just went around killing all our chickens too. What's up with that?
Yeah.
Can't export them if they're all dead. Problem solved.
Yeah, wasn't that like a big thing in the Biden admin? Just like killing off chickens?
The bird flu.
Bird flu.
That's why egg prices went up. All right. That was fun. Thanks, guys.
That was great. Thank you
So
as
good
well.
to look at your beautiful faces in person.
Likewise.
Yeah.
Likewise. Absolutely. We'll have to do this again
I
sometime.
will
More
say,
the back of my head for you.
as much as I might seem like I'm defending tariffs, I am going to war against the tariffs for the penguins.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
I am doing that.
We expect nothing less.
So.
No, you did an excellent job still manning their side and making the plan clear, Kyle. Thank you.
Yes.
That's good.
Long live the Penguins. Thanks, guys, for tuning in. We appreciate you very much. This has been Human Reaction. For David Rand, Kyle Mack, and Bennett, I'm Joe Sheehan. We will see you next time. Thanks for tuning in to Human Reaction. Please be sure to like, follow, subscribe, and give us a review on your podcast platform of choice. And if you want to become a member and support the show financially, check out humanreactionpod.com. And remember, don't talk about it, Kyle. Be about it.